Our next session is Fueling the Ride, Practical Insights and Evolving Strategies in Jockey Nutrition. So to facilitate this, I'm going to ask Professor Giles Warrington from Ireland, the founding member of the Irish Jockey Health, Wellbeing and Performance Research Group, Chair of the Irish Jockey Research Advisory Committee, to step forward. And again, we'll give them a combined round of applause at the end. Professor Warrington is going to facilitate, joined on stage by Gillian O'Loughlin, who is a dietitian and nutritionist with a master's research in dietary practices of jockeys. She's audited all Irish racecourses and delivered on the National Catering Guidelines. She'll be looking at nutrition and supplements. Then we're going to be joined by Megan Roberts, a sports dietitian from Australia, who through her brand Jockey Nutrition. She's also released an ebook for jockeys, Weigh In Better. She'll be looking at weight awareness and dangerous practices. To be joined by Dr. John O'Reilly as well. You can all make your way to stage. Dr. John O'Reilly, an Irish gentleman, but based here in Hong Kong, a registered nutritionist with a PhD in exercise physiology, nutrition, and a sports science consultant to the Hong Kong Jockey Club. I think what he's looking at will be interesting. It's the routine that is available here in Hong Kong with that consistency of racing, something we might touch on later as well. And finally, we are also joined by Dr. Dan Martin of the UK, the head of industry nutrition services across Britain, horse racing, supporting jockeys from pre-licensing right through to retirement. So Professor Warrington will facilitate, but I'm going to ask Gillian O'Loughlin to start the presentations. Thank you.
Thanks very much, and absolutely thrilled to be here again. So thanks for the invite to speak. So I'll get stuck straight in. I hope my presentation is here. It is, great. So the reason I picked navigating the supplement maze, I suppose I'm working with jockeys, about 23 years, and oftentimes, I mean, every time I meet a jockey, I'm asking them, what are you taking and what do you do, whatever else. And we have no sort of firm evidence as to what is actually happening in our jockeys. So we said, right, I have supports now from Grace, another dietitian, and we had our student Jemima, so we said we'll take a quick look at this and see exactly what our jockeys are doing. So that's why I picked this today, just to talk about it, because it is an area of interest for all of us. So it's a huge industry, as I'm sure you're all aware, and currently, I looked it up there, is worth about 516 billion, this industry, the supplement industry, and apparently by 2034 it's going to be worth 900 billion. So huge marketing, and unfortunately a lot of the marketing outstrips the science sometimes, so a difficult area to navigate. And if you just look at the food pyramid here, or not the food pyramid, the supplement pyramid, really what marketing companies and supplement companies often would like to portray is that, you know, lots of these, go for these first and then downwards, whereas what I'm trying to portray, and all of nutritionists and dietitians, is that it's the food first approach that we should all be adapting. There's no point having your supplements without having the core stability there first. So, and I'll be going through this as we go through the talk. So when we talk about supplements, what I'm really talking about is sort of three main categories. So you've got your sports foods, which would be your sports bars, your drinks, things like that. Sports medicines, which would be more things like your vitamin C, or your iron, or calcium, vitamin D, micronutrients. And then performance enhancing will be things like, I suppose, caffeine in jockeys, and also creatine is an emerging evidence coming through there as well. So the Australian Institute of Sport do this really nice classification system, the ABCD classification system, and what they do is they categorize the various supplements and categories into A would be good evidence there, yes, you should promote these, they're safe, and then also then you've got the B, which is kind of emerging evidence coming out, so has potential to be useful. C is there's no evidence at all, and then D is it's actually banned and it's a risky thing to go for. So it's not it's a very evolving sort of list, because foods can go from one to the other depending on the research that's done and that's available. So it's ever evolving, but really useful, and there's the website there, you can look it up yourselves. So as I said, really every jockey and every sports person needs to ask, is the supplement necessary, or can I get enough from my diet? And the answer is you can get enough from your diet. Now we know with jockeys that obviously their lifestyles are a bit hectic. They, sometimes they don't have the full knowledge about what they should be doing. So it's important that you're getting the evidence and the what is going on in their diet first, and then looking at it and trying to help them to tweak their diets to become, as healthy as it can be. And then if there's something missing, then you can look at the supplementation. So before you consume a supplement, and again, sometimes there is this sort of theory of, oh, it's good, so more is better, and you get a lot of jockeys taking, inordinate amount of supplements that aren't actually really needed to them at all. So first thing is they need to know, is it safe? The second thing you need to know, is it permitted in sport? And so all supplements now will have, any good reputable ones will have Informed Sport, the marker on that supplement. So that's what we'd obviously encourage everybody to check for. You can get an app that you can download it. So if you are thinking of taking a supplement, you can just put it into the app, check it and see, is it validated by Informed Sport? And is it not on the banned list from WADA? So, and then obviously the other thing is there evidence that it works? You know, there's lots of branding out there, there's lots of shiny labels when you go into a health food shop telling you that this will do everything for you, but is it actually true? And what exactly is in it? A lot of supplements are produced in conjunction with other supplements or other medicines, maybe steroids, whatever, in a factory, so there can be cross-contamination and things like that. So you need to make sure it's batch tested, that it is secure, and that it's not going to cause any issues around doping. So, which supplements do jockeys generally need? I suppose, from my perspective, when I'm looking at jockeys, vitamin D is always the go-to that I always encourage them to take, because there's strong evidence to say that, yes, they should all be taking vitamin D, and that's the general population. And even more so than for jockeys. They're fully clothed the whole time. They don't get much sunshine. We don't get much sunshine anyway in Ireland. And so really important for their immune system, for their cognitive development, for everything, and that they get the vitamin D. Omega-3, again, anti-inflammatory, so important. Multivitamins sometimes, if the diet is just really, you know, I don't eat any veg, any fruit, you know, so again, that's another one I'd go for. Electrolytes, and then the probiotics, there's evidence there too. So, you know, obviously, again, as I said, the jockeys' diets are poor a lot of the time, so you're trying to get the diet right, and if you can't, then obviously top it up a little bit with the others. When it comes to injury, obviously, there's a lot of other things you need to consider. So again, you'd look at the jockey's diet, but you'd also look at the injury that's occurred and how you can best support that through the various methods. So, and obviously, the general advice around avoiding alcohol, ensuring good hydration, making sure they're getting adequate protein, the vitamin D, calcium, other bone supportive minerals. And then, as I said, depending on the injury, then you tweak other areas to that. And there is emerging evidence coming out about creatine and maybe the mild traumatic brain injury. So that's an interesting area, but not enough in 5 minutes to talk about. So back to the study that we decided we'd finally do. It's only the preliminary results, but I managed to get a few out. It's still being analysed. So, but I just thought it was interesting to look at, okay, the top 10 vitamin and mineral ergogenic supplements taken by Irish professional jockeys. So as you can see there, electrolytes are top of the list, the multivitamins, vitamin C. The disappointing bit, I suppose, after all my efforts, was that vitamin D was quite low down, and only 30 out of the, we had 73 respondents in total, and that was 15 females and 35 males, and about 50-50 flat and national hunt. So yeah, again, as I say, open to a lot more education required if I were to get that message across. The other thing that I suppose was interesting to me and jumped out was that I think 50% of the jockeys surveyed perceived that there was no health risks at all with supplements. So that again is an area that means that we need to work on and look at a bit more closely. So I think I'm probably over my 5 minutes. So the take-home message really, I suppose, is that, you know, supplements are the sprinkles on the cake. There's no point in having the sprinkles without the cake. You have to have the diet right first, have that basic piece in place, and then you can always build on what you need after that. So look forward to taking more questions at our panel. Okay, thank you.
Hello everyone, thank you so much for having me, and for those who I haven't formally met, my name's Megan Roberts. I'm a sports dietitian based in Australia. I started the brand Jockey Nutrition about 8 years ago, and I've been practicing as a dietitian for 10 years. Michael, I was born into racing. I think that's what you said. And for some of you in Hong Kong, South Africa and Australia would probably know my father quite well, Dr. Tim Roberts. He famously quarantined and detected equine influenza in both South Africa and Australia, and is well known for his work with Chris Waller, helping purchase such horses as Winx. So if you see a blue Winx-coloured Mustang driving around Australia with the number plates Winx backwards, because he wants people to know who's behind them, that's my father, God bless him. And my mum was a World Cup show jumper, and I myself were a competitive show jumper, and my sister is a World Cup show jumper who's represented Australia. So today I want to talk to you about 3 simple solutions that are inexpensive and relatively easy, in my opinion, to implement to improve the health, safety and welfare of our athletes. these solutions that have come to me over the past 10 years in practice as a dietitian. So I thought we'd start something a bit different, so we're not slide heavy and text heavy, is to do a short visualization. So if you feel comfortable, I encourage you to gently close your eyes or just relax your gaze. And whilst you close your eyes, I want you to focus on your breath. Take a few deep breaths in and out. And I want you to visualize a typical day in your life. So what time do you wake up? Do you roll over and kiss your significant other? Or do you travel a lot? Do you go to a local cafe every day? Or do the morning school drop-off? Are you working long hours? Whilst visualizing your typical day, think about how many interactions with people you have. Can you put a number on it? The barista, the bus driver, your work colleagues, the gym receptionist. How many people today have you already interacted with? Now imagine a pain point in your life. Now that could be anything that's personal to you. Something that causes you worry or concern or stress. It could be financial difficulties, relationship problems, medical or health issues, or something you're concerned about, perhaps in-laws coming to stay over the holidays. Now imagine every interaction you had with a person on your typical day or today that was a reminder of that pain point. If you calculated the people you interacted with, how many would there be? Would there be 40, 70? That's 40 more times that dread and worry of that pain point you have been reminded of. Did you include all the virtual interactions, social media, WhatsApp, emails, or online meetings into that figure? What would your total number of interactions be? I think we can all say it would be a lot. So now imagine a jockey, one of our athletes. Imagine being reminded every time you interacted with someone about your weight, what food they're eating, and how they look, either good or bad. Naturally, this has a negative impact. So what can we do? You can now open your eyes if you haven't already. I saw this image on social media and I thought it was a great representation. Yes, it's of the racehorses and who they employ, but I think it's a good visualization of how many interactions that jockeys interact with. So a jockey's daily reality, okay? They're already weight aware and they already use dangerous practices. So then you add the stakeholder dialogue into that and it will impact their mental health. It exacerbates disordered eating and eating disordered behaviour. So who are these stakeholders? Oh. So the stakeholders are jockeys, pre-apprentices, apprentices, professionals, and retired jockeys. Obviously everyone at the track, including truck drivers, stable hands, and so forth. Us in the community, we are all stakeholders, punters, and you think about the online presence that a lot of the psychologists spoke about today as well. So I believe there are 3 pillars to solutions to help our jockeys and their mental well-being. I think we should set weighing practices, which include pre-licensing and race days only that we weigh our athletes, and that a minimum notice period should be provided to an athlete if they're to be weighed outside of those timeframes. This will help to eliminate daily weight anxiety and reduce dangerous weight practices. Number 2 would be stakeholder education, and that's to improve industry knowledge around weight and change the weight culture in racing. And then to ensure medical screening for eating disorders and malnutrition is to be added at pre-licensing and annually, because early detection is better. We spoke about set weighing practices, but with the stakeholder education, we can do simple messaging, topics and language around athletes and weight, why it's important not to comment, good or bad, towards our athletes, why weighing your athlete is doing more harm than good, and general information about sports nutrition to eliminate the misinformation. And as you can see, one of the quotes from a truck driver, eggs will make you fat, is one of the commentaries that I received by one of the jockeys. And that's the rhetoric we're getting in the industry, just comments like that, and then they take it verbatim. I think we should also screen our athletes with a jockey-specific eating disorder screening tool and also a malnutrition screening tool. Some of you may be familiar with the MNA, MST and the SGA. They're specific for aged care communities or cancer patients and so forth, but we could look at creating a screening tool that's specific. I think we should also use DEXA scans for body composition and bone mineral density at pre-licensing and annually to flag high-risk athletes. I know there's research to say that athletes won't follow the minimum weight suggestions from the DEXA scans, but we can at least flag those athletes and then we can monitor them on a more frequent basis as well. And that's all. Thank you. Please stay in touch. Those are my contact details.
I just brought my clock here to make sure I don't go over the 5 minutes. Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be invited to speak here alongside the other panelists who I know for many years through my involvement with horse racing. So in the interest of providing a little bit of information about what goes on here in Hong Kong, you know, the theme I have for this few minutes is basically looking at the unique challenges that are here in Hong Kong and the opportunities that maybe are presented by the individual nature of what goes on here in Hong Kong as well. So just as a little bit of a background, racing, for those people who are not aware, racing season in Hong Kong goes on from September to July. We have day races in Sha Tin mostly on Sundays, which we're going to go on this coming Sunday. And last night was an example of a race night in Happy Valley as well. So 2 race meetings per week. Generally, we have 88 race meetings approximately per year. And at any given time, approximately there's 23, 24 jockeys based in Hong Kong here as well. So why is Hong Kong unique? Well, as mentioned, we have 5 non-racing days, non-competitive racing days in Hong Kong. We have a significant ethnic diversity amongst the jockey population here, about generally a 50-50 split between the locals and the non-locals. That's kind of a unique situation in terms of other jurisdictions. We have significant situations here in relation to the environmental conditions that jockeys are facing with a lot of heat and humidity. This obviously gives a bit of a situation with dealing with hydration and also with electrolyte demands. These are things that maybe don't go on as much in other jurisdictions. There's a diverse culinary and cultural situation in Hong Kong. Jockeys are exposed to lots of different types of cultures, types of diets, types of dining situations. You may have noticed last night in Hong Kong, people eat very late in Hong Kong. So when jockeys have commitments, maybe with owners for late evening dinners, that's not exactly the most convenient thing, but sometimes these are commitments that they must uphold. And also, from a lot of the information we've gathered over the previous few years, weight loss is not actually the primary concern for many of our riders. So this is something that maybe not always be the situation around the world in other jurisdictions. And we know that from going back to about 2012, I had the opportunity to lead a number of research projects and sports science investigations using our horse racing jockeys here in Hong Kong. And they were observational and descriptive in nature, but at the same time, we were able to gauge a lot of information about the physiological makeup, the effect of training and body weight management on markers of immune function, on musculoskeletal health, on bone health, things like this. So we gathered a lot of information over that timeline. And the thing was then, at that point, what opportunities did we see from the unique situation in Hong Kong and all of the information we gathered through those research projects? So in the theme of what this panel is about today, the idea was to use nutrition as a tool to enhance musculoskeletal health and also long-term well-being of our riders, and not make nutrition the enemy and make food the enemy, but to use it as a tool for jockeys to actually utilize. And to Megan's point earlier, we have been very fortunate in Hong Kong to have the opportunity to have annual DEXA scan assessments on all of our riders. On the left-hand side here, you get an example of what the report looks like. That's one page, and this is another page. Lots of random information. If I was just to hand that to a jockey, or if a clinician was to hand that to a jockey, they may not know what to do with it and how to act on it. But it is the gold standard for body weight measurement, looking at muscle mass, bone health, body fat percentage. And we saw over our series of studies initially that there is generally very poor levels of bone health amongst riders globally, but also in Hong Kong. And particularly in Hong Kong, we saw it in the lower limbs for whatever reason. So we were seasonally tracking body composition through the DEXA scan, and from these DEXA scans, reporting back to jockeys on an individual basis to be able to provide, nutrition advice, training advice to see where you are versus where you could be if you follow the right pathway. So I'm not going to share too many graphs and slides and things like that, but basically what I'm showing here on this particular graph, it's the same data presented in two different ways. But for every rider we've had who's been in our program, who's been looking at the annual DEXA scans since 2021, the green bars represent actually a positive change in bone mineral density and bone health amongst those riders since they've got their first initial DEXA. Of course, we have 3 riders here on this particular graph. You can see that actually since their baseline scan, their bone health has continued to recede. Now, being a jockey, that's normal, that bone health, given the poor rate of nutrition traditionally, and maybe hydration problems. But at the same time, on the right-hand side, what I'm showing here is that every jockey who's got a DEXA scan in our program in Hong Kong since 2021 or 2022 has had positive changes in their musculoskeletal health and their bone health. The 3 riders you see here in the red have joined in 2023, and one of them actually joined just this year. So hopefully over time we'll be able to get those jockeys moving in the right direction, which is really counterintuitive to the traditional sense of what a jockey is exposed to. So that's just something I wanted to show, a quick takeaway from intervention with nutrition and strength and conditioning, educating jockeys about particularly where they can make progress, and making sure that nutrition and indeed the gym and weight training is not the enemy, but something that can help them for their long-term health and well-being. And with that, my final slide is just, as mentioned by Mr. Harding earlier today, every year we're trying to do something in Hong Kong to increase the level of care, to increase the level of support and our level of knowledge about our jockeys. So what we've done this year, in addition to the annual medicals that jockeys have been getting traditionally, and in conjunction with our colleagues here from Union Hospital, we've introduced additional blood biomarkers to assess our jockeys for renal health, liver function, thyroid function, additional markers for bone health, so we can actually use that information to guide further advice we can provide for our jockeys. So I know I'm up on time, but it's essentially the method here for us in Hong Kong is to try to assess and be as preemptive as possible to identify any early signs of problems with bone health or clinical health, provide feedback and advice so they can use nutrition and exercise to improve their performance. But to be honest, from my point of view, I'm not involved in racing outside of my involvement here, to improve their opportunities for long-term health and well-being. So thank you very much for your time.
How do we move forward? Green. Okay. Afternoon, everyone. So where the previous speakers have spoke about something quite specific or nutrition-specific challenges, I'm going to take 2 big steps back and talk about something from a much more strategic point of view. So no matter where we are in the world and what currency you're accustomed to using, funding in the nutrition space has historically been an issue for myself and our colleagues on the stage here. When I first entered the sport back in 2014, and it's worth noting actually, the core funding in the UK is provided to us by the Horse Racing Betting and Levy Board, with additional funders as well, which I'll come on to shortly. But when I arrived in 2014, the funding was pretty modest, around £25,000 per year, increasing gradually up to only around £30,000 per year, considering it's a 360-day plus per year sport, and there's over 600 jockeys, a rather moderate amount. However, in 2021, we had a nice funding increase, and then again in 2025 increased further. Naturally, with the increase in funding, there was an increase in the amount of days, capacity and availability for nutritionists and dietitians to work with our athletes on a day-to-day basis rather than a more ad hoc approach. And when you consider or factor into that the additional funders, particularly from the Injured Jockeys Fund that co-fund the weekly clinics and the lab availability at Liverpool John Moores University, in addition to some co-funding again with the two licensing schools, the funding actually goes off the chart. And so if I reframe where we are today, we're around, or next year at least, we'll be around the £150,000 mark, which is significantly more than where we started. But that change has really effectively come only in the last 5 years. And it's that 5-year window that I want to try to unpack a little bit, maybe to help others in the room. And to help unpack that, I'll demonstrate it over 5 key points, which I'll keep nice and concise. In 2021, I assumed leadership of the industry nutrition team in the UK, and the first thing that I felt I should do is conduct a little bit of an industry audit, map out across the industry from pre-licensing through to retirement, where are the key areas where nutrition and dietary support plays a part, everything from the pre-licensing screening, the licensing courses themselves, right through to trying to have a seat around the table when governance decisions are taking place around rule changes where nutrition and weight making may be key. And all I did effectively was figure out where are we now, or at that point in time, what are we doing pretty well and we're demonstrating impact, where are the areas that we're having some impact, what could be better, and most importantly, where the areas are blind spots, the areas that we've got no involvement in whatsoever, but are probably quite important to do so. By engaging in that initial process of doing an audit, it allowed me to then start to build a strategy, an industry-wide nutrition strategy. And I've presented this in the past in a more junior form, in a formative version, but it's expanded and it's evolved and been iterated over time. So at a place now where it's very clear for everyone in our team, but also the industry to see we've got a clear mission statement and key strategic objectives that we're working towards. And when we unpack that further, it's very clear where we're going to spend our time, where we're going to spend the resource, and who's going to deliver it and what content we're going to be covering. And perhaps most importantly for some people, how is it that we're going to actually operate? Off the back of that, that is when we received our first increase in funding, almost as a pilot amount of additional funding to see can we bring this strategy to life. So point 3 really is the service delivery. So trying to bring that from paper into the real world. So providing nutrition-specific services from pre-licensing once they are joining the industry, whilst they're in the saddle at the race courses, working with the 59 race courses, when they're out of the saddle, working with the Injured Jockeys Fund, and continuing the research collaboration at the research institutes in the UK, particularly Liverpool John Moores University. And the team effectively looks a little bit like this. So there's myself and there's Ollie, Hannah and Lee that make up the industry nutrition team that are funded by the Horse Racing Betting and Levy Board. And then the work that Carl and his team does at the university is funded by the Injured Jockeys Fund. A key part in my role in maintaining that funding and hopefully making it go further is that of transparency and reporting, and in particular trying to make sure that we stay in the upper right quadrant in this matrix, not only delivering high impacts and making it something that jockeys need and find useful, but also providing high value for money. And by doing that, we've effectively built a trusted partnership, although they are still grant givers and we are just grant recipients. We're in effect working towards a trusted partnership where they feel that we're delivering on what we said we were going to do in terms of impact and value for money. And from that, building and developing and nurturing that partnership allows us then the strategy to evolve, to iterate, to grow, and in turn hopefully ask for more funding. And that's why we've seen literally in the last 18 months the funding increase go up once again. But I'll end on this point though. In the UK, there's approximately £1.5 billion slushes around in the industry every single year across all 4 corners of the industry. Of that, as I said, next year will be around £150,000 in terms of funding, which represents less than 1% of 1%, which considering it's a weight-making sport and it's 360 odd days of the year in terms of competition, I think it's still quite a small amount and there's probably more that we could go for if we work together. It's not always wise to compare one sport to the other because there's a lot of variables and they're very different industries, but I'm going to do it for the sake of making a point. For example, one football club has double the amount of industry funding, has double the amount of funding for nutritionists. This is around the wage bill for the nutritionists at one football club, which is twice the amount we've got for the entire industry. And that's just one team. So if you map it out and you actually go across one league, it's like 20 times the amount. So although not always wise to do comparisons, because you're not comparing apples and apples, it's a point worth making that there's still more that we can do. So before I leave and join the panel for some questions, summarising thought, we have experienced a fantastic and very welcome increase in funding since 2021. The key catalyst for that was developing that strategy. And of course, maintaining the funding has come through being transparent, regular reporting and demonstrating both impacts for the jockeys but value for money and return on investment. Of course, I'm talking about the UK. Different racing jurisdictions have got different funding models and different areas where you need to go and try and get that additional funding. But hopefully those 5 stages is something that you can take away with you and either revisit previous hits on the crossbar where you've not got the funding, or take that and try and get it from somewhere else. But of course, as I just said at the end, compared to other sports, we're still relatively underfunded. So I frame this as a journey. We went from, as I said, £25,000 only 10 years ago, and we're about 5 times more than that now. So hopefully it's a journey, and in 5 more years' time, we'll be another 5-fold on. But yeah, I'll leave that there, and welcome your questions on the panel.
It's very gratifying for me, somebody who's been coming to this conference for 20 years, to see the advancements and developments both in our knowledge, our understanding, but more importantly, our practical application. So it is great to see, but what I would say, there's a lot more to be done, and I think our panel members would all agree with that. So we are very fortunate to have this expertise working within the horse racing industry. So I thought what we might do in this discussion is maybe unpack some of the topical issues around the area of nutrition. But before we do that, I thought what might be nice is you had to speak very briefly for 5 minutes. Could each of you just give us one take-home from what you presented? So maybe starting with you, Gilly.
God, one take-home. I could sit here all day, Giles. I suppose the take-home, is really food first. I suppose that's the take-home, really, that you just need to support the jockeys, and that's where it comes in, as Dan's mentioned, about having the supports to do that with jockeys, and give them the basic advice and get that right. And there's so many things you can do with diet to just, that's why I love working with jockeys, because jockeys' diets are so off the wall sometimes that you just think, okay, listen, let's just start here, get this right, and work slowly towards it. And it's little wins that get you there in the end. So definitely food first is my take home.
I've got 2. Really quick, stakeholder education. Number 1, I think, is key to create change, especially around the weight culture. And let's not weigh jockeys if we don't have to. If we can make that change in the industry, I think we're going to have happier, healthier athletes who are going to want to stay in the sport a lot longer. So they're not going to the track and someone tells them to jump on the scales just because they feel like it, or they want to hold them accountable, but they're a pre-apprentice.
Yeah, thanks, Charles. I probably would have said practical application, but you've already mentioned that one. So to be honest, I think it's maybe preventative approach, so that we can identify any particular areas of weakness or any areas that jockeys may be falling behind in terms of fitness, health, clinical health, musculoskeletal health, and be able to provide advice in a proactive way rather than dealing with situations after they occur.
Yeah, and I think on those five steps, go to step 1 straight away. Like assess and audit where you are right now, whether it's nutrition or whether it's any other department or element of sports science. If you're requiring more funding or more resource or more time, whatever it is, conduct a needs analysis and audit, and I guess put it together in some sort of report back to the stakeholder that you need to go to, and hopefully create a story and a narrative and a strong rationale for the more resource of whatever it is that you're asking for.
Okay. Nutrition is full of myths and fads. Okay. So if you could have one wish that you could get rid of a myth or fad you'd want jockeys to forget about, what would it be, Gilly?
Oh, God. There's no such thing as a quick fix. I think that's the big thing. Everyone's looking for the miracle placebo that can the silver bullet that'll solve it all. So I think that's, the myth that you can take in a bottle, bikini in a bottle, I think was one of the things they used to promote, not necessarily for jockeys. But so I think just really, that it's you have to work at it, and it's a planned approach. So getting rid of the myth that it's an easy fix like that.
Yeah, and you were talking to me yesterday about one practice you'd come across in terms of prescription of supplements. Do you want to share that with us?
Yeah. So there was a jockey, and a few have come to me recently where they're not feeling great. And when you actually delve into what's going on, this particular jockey had gone to one of the companies where you provide your blood sample and they come back with a full 100-page report of all the things that you're missing and all the things you should be doing. And this poor particular jockey had actually gone off and every supplement that was mentioned, he bought it, regardless of whether it was high or low in his diet. And so consequently, he was taking mega doses of these vitamins. He sent me a photo of each bottle that he was buying, and of course the company was selling the bottles as well. So just I suppose that was really frightening to me. I just thought, oh my God, no wonder you're feeling so crap. So by using a tool that I use to analyze the diet, you can actually go through, analyze exactly how much of everything you're taking, including the supplements, and then just pare it back and say, this is what you actually need, this is what you're taking. So I mean, it's just, it's frightening when there's a little bit of vulnerability there, and also looking for this quick fix, and then unfortunately lack of knowledge and support. So anyway, put them right. But unfortunately, this is commonplace, that there's lots of companies out there making lots of money with vulnerable people to try and tell them they need such and such, and not giving them the full backup advice afterwards, which is really dangerous.
Megan?
I would have to say, if I could wave a wand, that carbohydrates are not the enemy. They're your friend as an athlete. And Ozempic or Mounjaro is not the way forward.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything I've heard so far here today. But essentially, for me, I would just like jockeys to know that there is no jockey diet. That doesn't exist. And I don't know whoever used that term, but I hope they never used it, because the diet for the person is the appropriate diet based on their needs, their weaknesses, where they can get strong, maybe their allergies, maybe their deficiencies, maybe their likes, their dislikes. There's no one piece of paper I can walk into the Shattin jockey's room and say, there you go, guys and girls, there's your diet for eternity as a jockey. There's no jockey diet. The right diet is the right food for you.
Yeah, mine would be, it's not necessarily purely dietary, but it's certainly to do with weight making and weight management. And the myth is, in the weighing room, is that resistance-based training makes you heavy. There's some fantastic strength and conditioning coaches in the room. There's Gavin, there's Wayne, there's Danny. I've seen those guys work with both fit and injured jockeys, get those guys to adapt not the volume and quantity of the muscle tissue they've got, but the qualities of it, and turn them into very strong, very robust, very powerful athletes, whilst not adversely affecting the weight in terms of in gaining weight. So for me, that's one of the biggest myths that exists, and that we sort of have to dispel almost on a weekly basis.
John, you want to come back?
Yeah, because I totally agree with Dan as well. And it's one of the benefits of being able to show jockeys their DEXA scan, their muscle mass, their bone health, and their body fat percentage, and to show them. And totally, the food is only what comes after the training. And it's one of the title of the session is about fueling. So we try to put the body under stress to be able to refuel it, so that the body will improve and regrow stronger, improve metabolic health, improve bone health. So absolutely, if we can show, it's very easy once we educate the jockeys to show that there is a pathway for you to lose half a kilo or 1 kilo of body fat and concurrently grow half a kilo or 1 kilo of muscle mass. Your body weight over time will not change, but what you've done in that situation, you're faster, you're stronger, you have more power, you have more metabolic health, and your ability to burn calories in a sedentary situation is increased. All these things are extremely beneficial for riders. So being able to demonstrate year on year that this is what they can achieve is certainly really beneficial. So yes, the involvement of resistance training, and I'll talk a little bit tomorrow about the Centre of Excellence that Andrew mentioned earlier, but absolutely we need to expose riders to weight training and be able to help them benefit from that as much as possible.
I think critically, practical application, translational, behavioural change is the critical thing. And Dan, I know you did a lot of work on behavioural change for your doctoral work. We've talked, there's a lot of resource, there's a lot of education, there's a lot of knowledge. Uptake seems to be very mixed, if not poor. How do we affect behavioural change? How do we get jockeys practicing what we preach?
Yeah, good question. I mean, you can come at it from a few different lenses, whether you come at it through a research angle. Not everyone will be particularly au fait with it, so I'll sort of run through it. Typically, what we try to get jockeys to do, if you're wanting them to do something new, engage in a new behaviour, or equally stop doing something, because sometimes the behaviour is to stop it. There's usually three main components. It's around knowledge and skills. Do they know what they should do? So do they know what they should eat, in what time, at what time, in what quantity? Do they have the opportunity and access to do it? So typically, like our team, we base most of our educational resource around the 4 environments. If you were to ring, if anyone was to ring any jockey right now, they're either at home, on the way to a race course, or a working yard. They'll be at the yard, or they'll be at the track itself. Are those environments set up to be conducive to the advice that we're giving? And then the third, which we can't always control, but we can certainly influence, is their motivation and commitment to it. So some jockeys, as we know, I think it was Michael said earlier on, it's a losing sport. 90% of the time, they're probably losing. If every dietary decision that you make, or every time you eat a meal or take a drink, is based on your mood, based on like the outcome of your day, and they are changing, it's changing in the wind, they're probably going to make adverse and not great dietary choices. So it's a case of making sure they've got the knowledge, setting up those environments and working with them to value nutrition, see that it does have a role, it can be a positive role, but also that that stability in terms of mood. And no matter whether you've had a great day, that's not an excuse, so that's not a reason to then let's celebrate and let's overconsume and drink shed loads of alcohol. And equally, if I had a terrible day, that's not a reason to find solace in food and alcohol. It's a case of no matter what type of day you've had, be consistent, and if you have those 3 pillars, hopefully you can instill some new behaviours.
Anybody else want to comment on behavioural change?
I think early intervention is really important as well, and at least in Ireland, thankfully, we now have our minimum riding weight programme, which means the jockey, right from the day that they're taking out their apprentice licence, they're actually getting advice around, okay, this is what your minimum weight should be, this is what your body composition is, this is what your diet should be, and trying to help them to move towards a better diet, to get them on the right path from the start, really. So I think definitely, and I've noticed over the 23 years working with jockeys, I mean, in general, the population are becoming more health aware, and knowledge is improving, I suppose, from school and things like that. So I think it is a slow burn. I think having mentors is really important as well, that they can see, okay, well, this guy does this and he's managing it and he's making weight in a healthier way. So I think, yeah, it's multi-pronged. And as Dan said, I think having catering, race course, nutrition is really important, that you're telling them this is what you should eat when you're here and it's available to eat. So I think multi-pronged.
And you talked about monitoring, and then Megan and John, you mentioned screening as part of your discussions. Can you just elaborate a little bit more? What should we be screening for if we're trying to help jockeys make weight?
Yeah, I would really love if the industry could take on board screening at pre-apprentice level and then annually. As we know, athletes who are going through a change in rank are at greater risk. They're trying to impress you as owners and trainers, the industry. They want to get more rides. They want to make a name for themselves. And we know that in athlete populations, AIS will have it on their website. In the swimming teams, they see it a lot. They are very prone to developing eating disorders, disordered eating, and they're just vulnerable populations. So if we could use a screening tool, which is what I use with all the athletes that I take on board. Again, I'm a private practice. I do it on my own. I do consult with Racing New South Wales, Tas Racing, and Racing South Australia ad hoc, but it's predominantly just on my own. If we could get researchers to do a specific jockey screening tool, you've probably heard of the SCOFF questionnaire. It's a 5-prong question where we can screen for eating disorders, but it doesn't take into account the weight changes from sweating, which is obviously very significant and unique to this sport. And then if they get 2 or more, you would then refer them to do an EDEQ, and there's links that I can share which are free and they're anonymous through Inside Out Institute, where you can get your athlete to go do the questionnaire, both of them, and it will spit out results they can take with it to their GP or doctor. So that would be definitely one, is the eating disorder screening tool, and it should be done annually, in my opinion. Or more frequently if you diagnose someone. Obviously a GP can only do that, or a psychiatrist. And then the DEXA, I think, is really important because a lot of jockeys are asked, oh, what do you want your minimum weight to be? In Australia and New Zealand in particular, and they're not given the advice of, okay, if we look at your DEXA results or your skin folds, this is a theoretical walking weight, or what you can walk around as, and this is how much you'll have to sweat. And there's such an emphasis of, why aren't you walking around at your correct weight? Well, they don't need to, so why are they being forced to?
I totally agree with that, with what Meg just said, but at the same time, the screening what we screen for should be based on what knowledge we've accumulated over the previous 10 or 15 years. Giles, a lot of the research that you were involved in educated us as to the pitfalls jockeys always have, but previous to maybe 15 or 20 years ago, or maybe even more recently than that, we weren't aware of that research. We were basing our knowledge on other sports. But now we know so much about the detrimental effect on the body of the demands of racing. So we screen for those particular areas. And like what I mentioned here in Hong Kong, we're doing that in terms of thyroid function, in terms of hormonal health, bone health, things like this, liver function. So if we're screening for that, because we know the demands of a racing season is very detrimental on those particular clinical areas of the rider, well then hopefully we can get out in front of those things instead of dealing retrospectively with problems that have occurred and we miss them.
And I've got a question for Dan. So Megan, you're on your own basically. You're providing that service in a very big country. You're in a situation where not only you're a provider, but you're managing a program as well. What are the challenges of the two of those roles?
I think the biggest challenge that we face, and I think it's always going to be a challenge, but we're much better at it, is standardisation of service. You've got 4 people in. Of course, you don't want to stifle individuality, and people have got their own methods. But at the same time, we need to ensure there's a consistency of service. So whether they come and see myself or Lee in the north of England, or whether they go and see Hannah or Ollie in the Midlands in the south, you need to make sure that they're getting the same standard of service, standard of care. Equally, we do a lot of racecourse visits and audit the food provision there and give feedback to the racecourses. That's incredible. There's an element of subjectivity to that. So we have to work hard to make sure, again, that we are all on the same page. So we do some standardisation exercises 3 or 4 times across the year. But for me, that's the biggest challenge. In terms of leading the team, they're incredibly motivated and they're incredibly skilled. That's the easy part. It's much more making sure that there's, it's standard across the UK.
Okay, I've hogged the show here, and we've got a few minutes left, so I'm sure there's plenty of questions from the audience. So if you want to stick your hand up, and we'll get a microphone to you. Don't be shy.
Thank you so much for the panel and the conversation. Dan's kind of gone through the challenges. I wonder, is there any other panel in terms of, it's clear that there is a lot of differences across the jurisdictions. Is there a way that you can be better at collaborating across those jurisdictions? I don't know if you share some ideas.
That's why we have these conferences, I suppose.
I was going to say the same
and
thing.
You're right, Arthur. We do need to do more of that, and I think we have talked in the past around, having sort of a stock of resources that we could all share, and I think we still haven't fully got there. So yes, there's a lot we could do. So sorry, I interrupted you, John.
No, but I was going to say the same thing. I mean, to Michael Caulfield's point earlier, the reason we're here is so that we can connect a little bit better. We can exchange ideas, exchange the findings we have, and have a few kind of informal conversations about maybe, okay, what problems do we see commonly, and how can we, generate maybe enhanced methods to provide solutions to those problems. Because sometimes as researchers or even practitioners, we're very good at identifying problems, but really one of the main benefits or roles that we can give to the riders themselves is identifying methods of pathways for solutions. So these conferences and the interaction, I think, is the way to go.
Arthur, you may have volunteered yourself for a role there. You can be the chair of the International Nutrition Jockey Committee.
I second that now.
John, can I ask a question there? At what point does in Hong Kong do the jockeys get a DEXA? Is it like pre-apprentice or apprentice? And do you link with a local hospital, or do you have your own scanner?
Okay, so it's an annual scan. So it would generally happen in an ideal world, all at the same day, right at pre-season. But it's within 2 or 3 weeks either side of opening day, depending on riders' commitments. Some riders are injured, some riders have other situations going on. But all of the DEXAs will happen annually. Within maybe give or take a fortnight either side of opening day, so at least we can gather them together like that. And in terms of I just have a connection here. So I consult for the Jockey Club, and I have a connection here with a local clinic, and the jockeys have been to the same clinic with the same scan and the same practitioner and administrator every year. So it just removes a lot of the variance and the noise around the data we get. It's the same machine and the same administrator. So yeah, that's how we do. But it's a really valuable piece of information for myself to be able to track the progress of jockeys, but also for the jockeys. They're looking, as I showed in the presentation there, the jockeys are looking at images of themselves and the progression of their physical well-being for many of them over the past 4 or 5 years to see, okay, well, I'm the same physical weight on the scales, but look at all the muscle I have. Look at all the fat I don't have. Look how my bone health has improved. And you know, these are elite professional athletes, and also they want to know, where should I be? And if we can help them understand where they should be, and to the earlier point, how they can get there, they will follow. They'll do their best to follow. So, I mean, we're dealing with humans, we're not dealing with machines, but at the same time, they will do their best to follow. So the DEXA is a very powerful tool for both sides.
You get more buy-in as well, don't you, with the programming? And also it's a nice baseline if there's any injury, illness.
Yeah, they're very interested to find out their own results. You know, whether it's their clinical results, and I'll talk a bit tomorrow about strength and conditioning assessments, but yes, how am I doing this year compared to last year? And to that competitive nature, how am I doing versus the rest of the jockey population that we're testing? So where do I fit in the league table, so to speak? So yeah, they're competitive athletes, as you well know.
Any other questions, sir?
This might not be for you, John, because you're based in Hong Kong, and I apologise if it's the wrong panel, the wrong time, and completely the wrong question. But I'm going back to my only piece of published research on weight loss and the effect on jockeys' mood. What is the panel's view on saunas? Because obviously they're not being used in the UK now, and I know from my experience that jockeys are now doing some pretty strange things with all the knowledge they now have, and I just love the line "food first." I wish that would become the mantra for everyone. Would you be not in favour, but can you see the role of saunas being useful if regulated well, and maybe coming back, because jockeys have to get to that weight?
Well, yeah, I don't want to hog the mic, but yeah, I mean, actually, I'll leave someone else talk, because you specifically said the question wasn't for me, and I can talk more about saunas tomorrow. Or will I go ahead? Okay, so I would 100% endorse the use of saunas for athlete well-being, in fact for human well-being, if, again, the education is provided to the user. We're dealing with humans who make decisions by themselves. The Jockey Club have provided saunas. If the Jockey Club didn't provide saunas, there are saunas in many other buildings in Hong Kong. So it's not a case of we'll prevent them from going. My idea is, let's provide education about the benefits of saunas. And a couple of weeks ago, Stephen Higgins, who's in the room here, chaired a meeting along with our stipendiary steward, providing information and protocols about how saunas can be used for the benefit. But also, we have to provide information to the jockeys about what's a detrimental effect if I inappropriately use this. Yes, we know we can sweat and lose weight, but there's other things that go on in terms of cardiovascular well-being, cognitive ability, all these things that we really want jockeys to have an optimum amount of. And inappropriate use of saunas purely for the use of weight loss, yes, you can achieve the number you want on the scales, but there's a number of negative outcomes as well. So I think it's education about appropriate use. Now, this is my personal opinion. It's not the opinion of the Hong Kong Jockey Club necessarily. It's my personal opinion. Education for appropriate use rather than restricting use altogether.
And what's the alternative? You've got jockeys driving in Australia 2-3 hours to the races in multiple pairs of clothing with the heaters on in the middle of summer, driving, and they haven't eaten the day before or the day of. They've gone to track work. They've ridden so many horses. They've even worn wetsuits whilst riding to then be driving a vehicle. I mean, I've worked also as a coal supervisor in production where we drive heavy machinery, and you think about safety, in that aspect. So what's the alternative? We know that they need it sometimes to make weight. They're not going to walk around at weight. If they're walking around at weight, that could be several days of them not eating. Would you rather them have an acute weight loss phase versus a chronic weight loss phase as well?
Okay, I'm just conscious of time, so I'm going to wrap up here. Just looking ahead to the future, is there any innovations you'd see coming in that are going to improve nutritional practice within the jockey industry? And if the answer is no, then it's no. But is there anything that you think, if we were to come back in 5 years' time, we'd be saying, "Oh, this is how we've progressed"?
These are tough questions, Giles. I think just, again, maybe better ways of educating, better ways of getting messages out to jockeys would be really nice. I think tools like we were all mentioning there, and to support and looking at what the diet is like, what they're taking, assessing weights, I suppose there's lots of, oh God, I'll have to come back to you on this one because there's loads of things we could look at, but I don't know, lads, if you know, or Megan, if you know of any.
Yeah, I think in all industries, and there's no reason it wouldn't help here as well, is the use of technology, digital media, AI, things like that. As I mentioned at the very beginning, one of our biggest issues, our biggest challenges is resource. And even if we were given an endless bucket of cash, there's still 600 jockeys in the UK, and there's only going to be a finite amount of time in the day. I think the use of AI-generated nutrition-specific apps that can basically be a nutritionist in the pocket for a jockey, not to replace the human connection. As Michael said, it's the key thing. But if they need to know something, what to eat at what time, in what amounts, to help them achieve X, Y, or Z goal, there's more than just the human available now to help them with that endeavour.
Yeah, agreed. I think we're not going to change the nutrition provision. The good food has always been there, and it will always been there. I think it's the access to information by the jockeys. If they can access the right information from the right source, then they can take action appropriately. I mean, to Gilly's point earlier, that rider who bought all the new supplements, it wasn't because he was trying to do anything wrong. He was trying to do the right thing, but he got inappropriate information. So I think the right access to the right information will be a massive step forward in the years to come.
And I lead quite well onto that point is I'm looking to, in the next year, release an app called I Am an Athlete. So Karen, who spoke earlier, I thought that's quite fitting anyhow, because jockeys don't see themselves as an athlete. But that could possibly be a centralised system where we pool our resources together. I mean, I'm not doing it for money. We're doing it to better the sport and the athlete and environment. So maybe that's possibly a centralised system that we can use for not only jockeys, but then pulling in the equestrian sports possibly for the funding as well.
Just bringing the session to a close, it reminded me of a quote I heard recently. If content or knowledge is king, then its application is King Kong, which is probably appropriate to Hong Kong. So, so I just want to thank our panel for a really excellent session. Thank you.
Thank you, Giles. Thank you all. Yeah, no quick fixes, and Ozempic doesn't work. I don't think there's a better time to tell you that there's a 5K tomorrow morning. It is being arranged by some of the Irish, not me, and I won't be presenting it. Outside the front of the Renaissance Hotel, for those who feel up to it. I think it's tradition, and good luck to all. I'm not sure if there's trophies for the winner. Now, I'm going to work backwards with you. So what we do know is that at roughly 1:45 we'd like you back for the presentation in relation to the outdoor simulation, sort of the extension of what Dr. Susanna Holt was showing you this morning. So if you can work back from that, where we're going to now is the poster presentations, which you won't come back to your seats then. I won't see you then until 1:45. So if you can keep that in your mind, we're now going to begin the poster presentations. And this is to go back to how we began this morning and to what Dara referred to. We all come here representing a jurisdiction or a cohort of the industry, whether it's the jockeys, some trainers, some stable staff, and we all bring something to the table. We can now, when we talk about the surveys that took place, the want to intercross the knowledge we have, this is the opportunity to take your space, your sphere, to add value or to take value or to do what it is you think you can bring back to your jurisdiction and make improvements. We have 7 on concussion, head injury, neurocognitive safety, looking at the delayed effects, underreporting of concussion, and the value of friends, trainers, valets in that regard. We've 4 on the psychological health, mental well-being and stress. We saw this morning, we could only scratch the surface there. That touches on stable staff and trainers in the poster presentations, rider evidence around depression and isolation. We've touched on that already, and about there being no off-season. We've 6 on performance training and physiological demands, looking at jockey position, irregular patterns on sleep, and the female jockey question comes up there as well, and the challenges that they have and the bone composition. We've 2 on safety systems, injury surveillance and technology, the connection of the rider and the horse and the need to take those together. I think we'll talk about that later this afternoon as well. And 4 on career pathways, support services and education, and looking at the next stage for jockeys. So I think there is something there for everybody, and I hope you all engage and benefit from it. And the posters don't finish at lunchtime today. It's the opportunity to begin the process, begin the discussion, and then we'll take it from there, not just into tomorrow, but beyond and on to the next one of these conferences. So the posters are outside. We'll begin with those, and as I say, if we can see you here after lunch at about 1:45 to 2, we'll be ready for the outdoor simulation. Thank you very much.